All right. Good morning once again, everybody, and thank you for dialing into our Well-Informed Managing Financial Stress. All lines will be muted for the remainder of the presentation, but at the end, we will have a quick question and answer portion where we encourage you to type your answers into the chat for our presenter to answer. April is Financial Literacy Month, a perfect time to take control of not just your money, but your peace of mind. Financial stress affects millions of people, impacting everything from sleep to relationships to overall well-being. Today, we'll explore practical, realistic strategies to help you better understand your finances, reduce anxiety around money, and build confidence in your financial decisions. Whether you're dealing with debt, budgeting challenges, or simply feeling overwhelmed, today we'll give you the tools to move forward with clarity and control. And we are proud to be joined today by Dr. Thomas Trost, who has over 35 years of experience as a clinical therapist, university faculty member, administrator, and small business owner. Dr. Trost holds a doctoral degree in educational psychology from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee and a master's degree in counseling from Michigan State University. He is the owner and director of the Shore Consulting Clinic, a medical clinic with multiple locations in the Milwaukee area. Rose has also been an active EAP affiliate as a presenter of professional programs, serving as a consultant for individuals and teams, and responding to critical incidents for a variety of business and educational organizations. Dr. Trost, thank you so much for being with us here today, and I'll now turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, and hi everybody. It's great to be with you once again. It's always great for me to visit with my friends in Chicago, and thanks for the privilege of talking with you today. And as was said, we're going to be talking. I can't think of a maybe more relevant topic than right now talking about financial things. We don't have to look far, do we? I mean, I almost believe all of us sometime today will be thinking about our financial condition in some way. Whether you're thinking about a bill, you're thinking about how much money you have in your wallet, what you're going to pay, for a bill this weekend, or we think about it all the time. And so I think it's really appropriate, that we take a look at the issue of financial stress. And I want to be clear. And you heard my background. I've been a therapist. Those of you that I've met over the years. Um, I've been a therapist up here in Milwaukee for nearly 40 years, working with individuals. I'm not a financial analyst guy. I don't work for an insurance company or an equity group. Um, we're going to talk about the idea of the stress though around it. So I'm not here today to give you a financial seminar or detailed advice. We're going to talk about how we manage this, how we can go forward with this. Yeah, we'll talk about some resources if you want to go in the weeds on some of the details, but mostly about how we're doing with it. How do we feel like we take control of our financial picture, and how do we manage, which you and I both know, right? That the emotional and the interpersonal fallout that comes with financial stress. And if it doesn't happen to you, it most likely happens to somebody you know. It could be a partner, it could be a friend, it could be a colleague, it could be a parent, it could be one of your children, depending on the age of your children. Um, it affects us, a lot of us. So we have a pretty ambitious agenda today to do this drone view of this very stressful topic. We're going to talk about stress and the impact it can have. What does it do to us? Well, let's review it. Let's open that up. I think a lot of us will hear it and go, yeah, that's right. Um, but it's a reminder of what we're doing, and then we'll talk about some strategies and some resources for addressing financial issues. What are some things that we can get? I hope what I can do is tweak you to identifying tools that you might be able to access. And then we'll talk about personal stress management strategies. You may have sat through stress management seminars before. Heck, you may have sat one through me, either through a webinar or me being down there. We'll focus a little bit on the financial stuff and personal stress. Then we'll talk about how do we support each other. A lot of us are supporting people who are under financial stress. You have a friend, a buddy, a sibling, like I said, a parent, a partner, a coworker that you know is really struggling, and you want to be there for them. How do we do that? And then we'll talk about the EAP. We always remind ourselves of that program. What a valuable asset, especially this one, because this topic has the emotional stuff, but there's also practical things, right? When we talk about money, So again, I'm not here today to sell you a penny stock. I'm not here to discuss what to do when you hit Powerball over the weekend. I'm not here to tell you who to bet on in the Final Four this weekend. We're talking about the idea of the emotional part of it, the stress of it. I think we all agree. If we were all sitting together today, we probably would confirm this. that most of us have experienced financial stress at some time in your life. As we talk about that today, and again, the chat line is there. If you want to share any information, or feel free to do that. Remember, we all can see it. But if you have any questions, we can attend to that afterwards. But I think we probably all would agree that we've had it happen to us one time. Maybe money was tight in growing up in your family, or like so many folks, maybe you're still struggling with student loans or other types of debt. Maybe you bought a house and you have that every month to deal with. Maybe you or a family member has recently experienced a job loss. We see so much of that right now. Um, Sometimes savings can be challenging, and that feeling that when am I going to break even? Well, while money is consistently a top source of stress in almost any survey we do, and I see that in my practice. So I wouldn't say every client I work with talks about money, but boy, it comes up when they talk about conflict and stress and relationships. Sometimes money's in there somewhere. And when we do surveys nationally and say, what are the most stressful things in our lives? Oh my goodness, money always lands really close to the top. Sometimes it's the economy that challenges us. We hear talk about all the time, right? Right now, at this moment, what are we talking about every day? What's on the top of the news almost every day? Gas prices, right? It just reminds us every day. You drive through your neighborhood, you look at the gas price. It's there. It sits there. Sometimes sometimes something's happened to us. It's the first time. Maybe there's been a job insecurity or loss or homelessness. We worry about so many things as part of this, and this can take on the feeling of it being overwhelming sometimes. Well, a first step in talking about financial stress is to acknowledge really how deeply it affects us and why is that so. Maybe you've never unpacked that. Maybe you just always worried about it, never thought about why. I mean, we know there's a sense of shame, right? That sometimes we don't like to talk about it because it's there, we are wrapped around ideas of maybe being fearful, maybe even helpless, and And that's a powerful stressor. When we talk about stress, when you throw in components like feeling hopeless, my goodness, that stressor goes nuclear. Um, and sometimes we, frankly, would rather not acknowledge it. Isn't it interesting that a major stressor like this, a lot of us don't want to talk about our personal situation? Unpack that and think about that. And what is it about it? What is it about money, or more specifically, feeling a lack of it, that makes it so stressful? Well, really, there's a number of reasons, but there's probably four major ones. One is that we know that financial stress kind of triggers that survival feeling, deep-seated survival. And that's really unnerving. That will I be able to move forward? We worry about that end of the month, that rent check, that mortgage check, that school check, whatever it is, and it can be constant and very pervasive. Secondly, it touches all parts of our lives. It's the currency not only for the basic necessities of our lives, but for a lot of us, it's the currency of our self esteem, our self worth based on dollars. And when that gets low, you know how we feel, right? We feel low. A lot of times, it feels like these are things we can't do it because it's out of our control, that we're at the mercy of circumstances. It can be difficult to imagine how we'll find our way out. Again, I would guess that all of us have been there in some form in our lives where we didn't know how we're going to get out of that. Maybe our partner lost their job, or you work for an industry that's in chaos. Whatever that is, it can be hard to imagine a way out. And finally, we believe that the answer feels like we need to turn away. Shame and anxiety could make us want to avoid this. We feel, I guess, paralyzed, overwhelmed. We want to avoid it practically and mentally. And that can make things even harder. And we don't bring these up to say, well, this is to make us sad. No, this is to make us understand. Why is this? Why is so tied to us? So now that's the overrange view. Let's bring it down to ourselves. Is it affecting your life? Is financial stress affecting your life? And maybe it isn't right now. I suspect it has or it will It's that big. I mean, if money issues come on suddenly in a major way, for example, like the pandemic, right? Or suddenly your wife's position, there's talk of being a downsizing at your partner's position. We become well aware of the stress. It gets to the point of being, I can't think of anything else. But sometimes financial stress, yeah, it's episodic. It's one thing, or it's long term. And it's so entrenched in our lives, we stop distinguishing it from overall stress. We almost feel like, it can describe it a lot of ways, but you almost feel like somebody's attached an anchor to you and you're just walking with it. I'm always worried about money. Maybe you feel that way, right? That's not unusual for us. We have to live with it. Well, to approach financial stress differently, it helps to identify it specifically. Some cues if it's affecting you. It might be a factor if, for example, you're always worrying about money and running those what if scenarios. High percentage of time, focus thinking about bills, the rent, your debt, your income. Do we dwell on this kind of panic inducing what if stuff? What if I lose my job? What if we lose our home? What if we can't pay the rent? What if we can't pay the doctor? Maybe it's a factor for you if you find yourself constantly juggling bills, constantly trying to figure out spending priorities. If you're constantly juggling and always having late fees, it's we find maybe even to the point of I wanted to save for fill in the blank, right? I want to be able to save for things, and I can't do it. Maybe you've reached a point and it's a factor where you're really screening your calls and your mail. You're not answering them anymore. You're just throwing bills out, you know. Um, that might tell us something. Or you're walking around feeling guilty about spending what you just spent money on, or you feel like you can't provide for the people that you should be. That's when it starts affecting our lives. So, what do we do? I mean, these are all difficult and kind of sad thoughts. I understand that. Well, if you see yourself in any of these examples or similar ones, or people that you care about are going through this is not meant for some grand, I gotcha, see what you're doing. No, it's not, that's what we're doing. We're not going to motivate each other through shame. But maybe think about it almost like you would a medical diagnosis, where you don't want to ignore signs or symptoms of a condition that is having a negative impact. That you're feeling this way, you have a problem, you have a pain, you have something that's going on. You go in and you look at the symptoms. And maybe the thoughts we have during this seminar today will help with that. Maybe we could view ourselves as doing our own medical diagnosis, our own stress diagnosis of this very sensitive event. So again, I want to emphasize we don't bring up these points for us to say, my goodness, I am those things and I feel bad about myself. That's not what this is. It's, I'm going to be curious about what's going on with myself right now and how do I make a change. I always pause here and I tell folks, and you may have heard me say this before, I'm in the change business. People come to see folks like me because they want change. And how do we do change? You can read 1,000 articles, books, TED Talks on change. Some of them are excellent. But I break it down to two steps. And one is to be curious about ourselves. Why do we do things? And that's what we just did. Being curious about what's motivating me, and it's a big umbrella under being curious. Family of origin stuff, my relationships. Why do I do that? So that we get to the point where we have a pretty good idea of what we're doing, what we're feeling, what we're thinking, and then we commit to an intentional act, a conscious behavior. And that's how we do change in our lives. Small steps. And we're going to talk about some of those things we can do now. But we've spent some time already talking about being curious. I mean, addressing the problem, this financial stress, is the key because we know that it can ripple out into so many areas, right? Money pressures can lead to so many things. We know it can lead to family conflict, tension, arguments. We're not getting what we want as a family, and we got to talk about the money. There could be emotional struggles where we feel overwhelmed, anxious, depressed, trapped, maybe even hard to find joy again or pleasure in your lives. Sometimes it leads to us to be isolated. We drift apart. We start declining invitations to do things because we're feeling like I can't afford to do that. And we start feeling inadequate or overstressed or embarrassed. It certainly can lead to physical problems. We know tension and stress can do that. The headaches and digestive issues, insomnia, high blood pressure. Sometimes it even leads us to neglect self-care. We wind up not getting enough sleep. We stop exercising. We lose our energy. We start eating poorly. We're working longer maybe because we want to make more money. We may even neglect healthcare because of its cost. And we might turn to unhealthy coping behaviors, quick fixes, suddenly smoking more, drinking more, eating more, taking pharmaceutical products more, whatever that is, self destructive behaviors, because we think that helps us manage the stress because it gives us that quick bump. My friends, feeling stressed by financial worries is normal. It is. But studies show that it can increase and lead to a negative spiral if we don't manage it. And that impact it takes on us, especially our mental health, makes it harder to find the energy and concentration to take on the problems. That's why the spiral, we get sucked down. And then in turn, the stress increases and our mental health worsens, and on and on and on. Let's be clear, right? We may not have the power to change that picture overnight, but if we face it and we face it honestly and authentically and openly, maybe we can find the resilience and the energy to open up solutions. So that's what we're talking about, being curious, seeing how do we find out of that? How do we start to begin to climb out? I mean, it sounds real dark, and it is. We all know that when you have financial stress, it's dark. It's not something we like, right? But we can lay down the foundation now as we learn to understand it. I mean, even just opening up about it is a great place to start. I give you kudos for checking in today, for jumping into the program, just being willing to talk about it. Because when this grows, we know it feels like a giant weight day in and day out. It's exhausting. It's paralyzing. Simply communicating with others can give us the power to reduce that weight, that we can push past the reluctance. And we've seen, right, as we just talked about, why we don't want to do it, why we don't want to talk about it. It's so discomforting. If we can push past that, and to make ourselves vulnerable, and it releases this from carrying it alone. Remember the anchor I said we're tied to? A friend, a colleague, a support person can help carry that anchor a little bit. Trusted others can lead to understanding, not judgment, not what did you do, how did this happen, but understanding and offer support, sharing those things. Just talking about problems out loud can be less overwhelming and more manageable. I've learned a few things. 40 years of doing counseling. We do so much better when we share a narrative. When we just share a narrative and say, I'm going to talk about something I hate talking about. It's so emotional, but I want to somewhere to be able to do that, to get the support, because it helps us gain perspective. We find out that there are people out there help us see our issues from that different perspective, and maybe they're even aware of resources that can make the difference. Sometimes just having someone available as a supportive listener is a huge step for us. And that's not to say this is easy. This is really hard. It is, to find that person. But try to identify at least one person in your support network who you might be willing to talk to about this stressor. Maybe it's a partner. Maybe it's a significant other. Maybe it's even someone who isn't aware of your financial issues. That might be a good place to start. We're going to talk about EAP in a second. They're available as well. But once you've taken that step, once you've done that, you might find it easier to be proactive about getting additional help and resources. We feel better when we're not alone. We feel better. We do. Because support people will say, you're not the first person to have done this. You won't be the last. There are resources out there. You've been there before. We will get you through this. There are resources out there too. There are all types of resources, and I just want to make sure you're aware of them. There's supportive services. I mean, right there on the side, and I wish we were in bigger print there. Remember that your EAP is always there too. You can reach out and they'll open the door. They can give you practical and emotional support and resources too. We'll talk about them in a second. But these agencies are out there. Things like credit counseling services and the United Way and Nationals Foundation, the Federal Trade Commission, HUD is out there. All of them, they're there. Most of them are no cost. They're there for individual help. They help people who have been here before. And even for some folks, that's an enormous relief. You're not going to surprise them when you call and say, this is what's going on, because they've been there. We want to remember that we also want to keep in mind that mental health support is an important part of changing your situation. If you're in that negative spiral, to have somebody help you through that. You may have developed some mental health behaviors that are concerning about compulsive shopping or compulsive gambling, or supportive services could help. And we'll bring it up again. The EAP is always there. Support is often the key to getting unstuck and being able to actively address your issues. Support can be there. I use the visualization all the time when I talk about support. That this winter I was actually down on campus. I was teaching a class and I parked somewhere. When I came out, there was a lot of snow on the ground. I couldn't get my car. I couldn't get it out of a parking space. I did everything I possibly can, back and forth, and I'm like, I don't want to call a tow truck. It's going to take forever. And of course, here comes 3 or 4 college students walking by. They saw it. They jumped right on it, helped me push me out. You know, simple support. Simple. They didn't know who I was. They didn't care. 2 minutes, I was out. It's a simple example of what support is. That's what we need sometimes. How do we do that? All right, so let's hope that we've laid the groundwork now for you to be curious and you're at that point of what can I do? What can I do to now to move forward and start making that change, that conscious intentional act. Taking any sort of action can be powerful medicine for that feelings of helplessness. I even hope that just you tuning in today said, I'm feeling like I can do something about that, because a good first move is to get a realistic picture of where you're at and identify the next steps. So this is the take action slide. Really 3 steps. 1, do the financial checkup. Remember I said medical diagnosis, right? If you got chest pain, you go in to see your doctor or cardiologist. What's going on? Help me look at it, right? Do a financial checkup. Review all things money. Track your spending. Write down for a month what you did. Use a spreadsheet if you want to. Know your assets and liabilities. Fill out a net worth worksheet. They're available online. Where you can factor in a calculation of what your debt will cost you over time. Those tools are available for you right online, right through EAP, right all types of areas. Secondly, review your money values. Look at the spending you've tracked. Take an honest view of it, right? Are you paying more for what you need? What might be changing? Clarify needs and wants. Are you tied up in self-worth and status? Take an honest look. Is this really something that I have to have or something I want to have? And I think one of the most powerful things is using an is it worth filter. Is that item or service worth the cost when it means I have to forgo something else? What are you giving up to have that? First of all, you may be just giving up time. This costs me 4 hours of labor. I make so much an hour. This costs that to have this. Whatever it is, this extra special coffee, this web service, this high level phone, whatever we're paying for. Is it worth it? It may be, right? But it gets you looking at it. And third, come up with a game plan. The realities that are exposed by all this review is a good foundation for shaping a pathway forward. Are you focusing on debt reduction or budgeting? Maybe you want to put energy into growing your income. What kind of goals do you have? Having a clear goal and then a realistic next step, that's the valuable motivator. Right? That's how we get started. That's how we move forward. This is that second step. This is crossing the Rubicon and saying, I'm going to start making steps. I'm going to start making changes. And again, let's not dismiss how emotional and powerful this is. I know we focused a lot of time on that, and there's a reason for it. It was important to do that. Well, how do we go further? So now we have maybe a compass, right? Maybe we're ready to do some things. Many of us are in relationships with significant others or roommates or family or children or whoever we are, right? A relationship that might be already stressed by financial hardship. And that can be further challenged by the changes that we need to help fix the problem. Talking about things like financial trade-offs and hard choices can really increase financial friction and really make that relationship part of that friction when we're already feeling edgy and irritable. I work with a lot of couples, and again, I would have a hard time remembering one couple that I've worked with, and they didn't walk in the door with this, that eventually we didn't start talking about money in some way. So we want to formalize a planning process because it can reduce tension around this topic and help us get to the same page. So how do we put some foam on the runway here so that we can work together on the same page to slow this down? A couple thoughts. One is talk through plans to find common ground and first steps and long-term goals. What do we want to do? Let's not talk about we don't have enough money to pay that bill. Let's first start with what's our common ground? What's our long-term goals here? And then establish a win-win negotiating approach rather than adversarial one. A lot of couples want to get into whose fault it is. Who's spending too much money on fill in the blank? You spend too much money on golf. You spend too much money on shoes. You should really get a different car. I know you grew up this way. We have to do it differently, right? We want to play the blame game. We don't want that. We don't want adversarial. Win-win means both of you are intent on solving the problem. Whenever I've done this as a mediator, sometimes with couples, the first thing I'll say is, here's the biggest part of all of this. What's the problem? What is the problem? Not about debating. What's the problem? Let's start looking for alternatives. Let's talk about pros and cons. If we can't agree, what compromise can we do? Can we try a trial period of things? Third, and I am a huge advocate of this, is scheduling a time each week to discuss and manage finances together. Have a business meeting. The more regular it is, the more structured this is, the less it becomes an emotional flashpoint. And so you sit down. I encourage couples to be creative about it, decide what night of the week, what afternoon, and this is part of a meeting we have. We sit down with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and we're going to talk about it and discuss. This is going to be, and during the week we don't bang on each other over this. We wait to our meeting. We don't want to have money kill our relationship. We don't want it to rob our joy. We have to find the positive. You know, avoiding endless discussions and arguments. Wait till the meeting. Let's not make money part of pillow talk, right? Or when you're in the car and there's nothing you can do about it. It'll rob your joy. It takes work. It's really extra work. This, I think, for people in relationships is really really hard. If I'm hitting you right now, and if you're going yeah 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 yeah, sit down with your spouse, sit down with your partner, whoever that you're thinking of, and saying this is really hard for both of us to do. Not just getting a solution, but the process of doing it. So formalizing it makes it much easier. Formalizing it makes it say, here's when we do it, here's how we do it. Well, we also know, along with relationships, financial challenges affect the whole family. And so we want to be sure that the whole family is part of the solution as well. A lot of times family members can have good ideas and will follow suit easier if they have a voice in solutions. Not only our partners and significant others, maybe you have parents that live with you or grandparents, but certainly also children. Working together helps minimize conflict. So again, how do we get people to buy in? Same thing. having a family finance meeting. And again, understanding the appropriate age of children. I mean, it's not the same as a meeting with your partner. I mean, a family meeting allows you to maybe understand others' viewpoints, like your kids, of what's going on, and you get them to brainstorm ideas. And again, for appropriate level of their age, but that they understand. Maybe sometimes you have to explain it in the simplest of terms. Well, we can't afford all the things we used to buy. So we need to put our heads together, decide what we can cut back on, and figure out how to save money. To get them understanding it. Get everybody's ideas about how to cut spending. People are more motivated to make sacrifices if they have a choice. Don't just dictate it. We're getting rid of cable TV, or we're selling our vacation home, or we're selling the car. Make suggestions. If you can't agree, yeah, maybe you want to offer to take a vote, but be clear in advance that you're the parents, right? And that you make the decisions. You want to brainstorm low cost family activities. Get everybody's ideas about replacement activities. And that's more fun than making eliminations. Announcing that we're not going on vacation this summer sounds terrible, right? But what are some things we can do this summer that maybe are more affordable? Get creative. Children want to be with the family and their parents. And there's ways to have that without spending a lot of money going somewhere else. And continue to keep them involved. Continue to keep them empowered, that they can learn by contributing. We're all in this together. That is the message you want. And for us as parents or leaders of the family, we want role model honesty, reassurance, stress management. We want to show them that we're engaged in this too, that we're making changes too. Note if you make changes. Note if you do something different. Well, if you're at that stage where debt is overtaking you, we know that every day can bring emotional landmines and you're exhausted and overwhelmed. It's so easy to fall into that state of denial and avoidance, or you're not answering the phone, you're just opening mail, right? Addressing the issues head on can free you from that added layer of stress, and you can begin to initiate positive change. So there's a couple things you can do. One is don't ignore your creditors. Oh my goodness, don't do that. Communicate with them. Many times they'll work with you. You can actually say to a creditor, I can't do that this month. I can pay something next month. If you're honest about it, many times they will work with you. You always want to keep a connection, and one way is keep paying something on the bills, no matter how small. Creditors may opt to not take adverse action if they know you're doing something in good faith. If you can, set up a payment plan. Certainly consider financial counseling. You can go right through EAP to do that. You can call EAP and get that set up. Professionals can help you understand. And a lot of times there are resources out there that are frankly very reputable and free. But make sure you investigate that. Check them out before you sit down and sign something, because there are predators out there that want to make money off your debt. And certainly reduce or eliminate the use of credit, except for emergencies. One card. Have one card. Check those regularly. I'm a big fan of advocating, especially if financial stress is there. And it sounds counterintuitive to look at something stressful every day if it creates stress. But a lot of times the stress is because it's ambiguous. I'm a big fan of people who check their accounts every day, to look every day, to remind ourselves what we're, and hopefully you're working on something and you're getting there, to check it every day. And again, I'll emphasize this in many ways. If you're feeling that way, your EAP might be able to offer a financial consultation. Well, along with all the stuff that we're doing, putting structure around spending and savings can eliminate some of the variables that put us off course. I mean, a lot of us aren't very good at this. So sometimes structure would help. And we can put some systems in place. Well, we've heard it all forever, right? You should have a budget. A budget is that time-honored system that helps us live within our means and funds the things that matter to us. Takes a little work up front, helps us stick to our spending priorities, helps us reduce daily stress, and can actually increase savings. The best budget in the world, and they're always organic, they're always changing, but the best budget means where you feel like your financial world's on autopilot. You know where stuff's going. You're working on it every day. And in that case, you can make it as automatic as you can. Tracking apps are out there. You can auto pay. You can get balance alerts what's going on. There's automatic debt reduction programs. And you develop this idea that I'm not going to auto renew. I'm going to say no to that. I'm not joining memberships or subscriptions. If I need to pay something, I'll pay it. We'll come up with alarms. What's going on? Become the CFO of your life. Become the chief financial officer with information and with systems. For you right now, you know this will help slow down some of the emotional responses because there's a system in place. Well, along with this focus on finances, we also want to be intentional, and there's that word again, to be intentional about managing the stress and how we find balance. Supporting ourselves with healthy choices is an important part of that. If we're going to find resilience and we're going to get through this, we need energy because this is hard work. It is hard work. It is hard work. We've got to give ourselves support. First is you want to maintain routines. You want stability. You want reassuring. Have dinner with the family. Read that book to your kid at night. Go for the walk. Take the dog out. Explore options for low cost things to do. Stay involved. Along with that, focus on self care. The big three: getting enough sleep, being conscious of what you're eating, and making sure you're getting exercise and activity. There's really some symphony that really plays better when we're doing those things and taking care of other personal issues. We feel better. Good choices will make you stronger. And with the emphasis on the physical. We know that when we're active, especially outdoors, Mother Nature is a tough clinician to beat. Get outdoors. It really reduces stress hormones. It's really better for us. It kind of recharges the body. And be aware that we will be tempted towards unhealthy means of coping. We're going to want the quick pleasure dot or something really fast, whatever that is. That extra cigarette, that extra caffeine, that extra sugar, that extra thrill of betting on something or whatever it is, to know that they're out there. Choose not to do those. They're short term. Look for healthier examples. Spending time with friends, getting outside, doing something good. And certainly, is simply, you want to remove temptations to overspend. If you have identified a pattern of behavior that leads you to overspend, remove it. Maybe you need to stay out of that store for a while. Maybe you need to stay off that website for a while. Boost your willpower will lower stress. And you know the trick about willpower, right? Everybody says, I wish I had the willpower. Well, you want to make something a habit. So if you want to break a habit, you want to stopping at that coffee store every day and spending X amount of dollars. Stop for a while. It'll take willpower. But as you habitually no longer stop there, and when it becomes a habit, you won't need willpower anymore. You now have a habit of not going there. That's what's the wonderful thing about habits. When they become habits, we don't need willpower anymore. Now, the flip side, of course, of habits, bad habits, is now we have a behavior that we habitually do. But for us to be able to be proactive to reduce stress. And, much of the stress that we have really comes from our heads, right? Worries and fears that spiral out of control. Sometimes small perspective shifts can help you change those thoughts that are overtaking you, and about shifting your perspective. A couple things you can do if you feel like that this is a program that's running on a loop in your head. One is minimize exposure to negativity. Keep your spirits strong. Don't get caught up in the speculations about the economy and the job market and on and on and on. Stay away from it. Don't say, why don't I have that? If you watch television enough and you watch this stuff, you think everybody have these robust 401ks that people are all retiring really, really wealthy except you. Be careful about that. They do that to drive sales. First of all, it's not true. And let's be careful about our exposure to that. And remember what's good in our lives. Be grateful. We have found over the years, and this is really something that's become more and more dominant, is that being grateful can really pick up our spirits. You want to try something? Try describing 3 things that you're thankful for. Try to find 1 or 2 things every day that was good and have it different every day and share it with someone. When somebody says, "How are you doing? How was your day?" I had a good day. It could be as trivial as I had a really good commute to the office today, didn't need traffic. I had a great cup of coffee. Hey, I talked to Bill at work. It was terrific. Or maybe I had a great sale today. Or it was a day I got a lot of good things done. I got the report done. Every day, share that I'm grateful for this happened. Give ourselves that boost. Treat yourself with compassion. Be yourself. Be your best friend. We all have that inner critic. We do. We all do. You know it, right? Self-criticizing ourselves. We know we actually perform better when we have compassion in our lives. A soothing word is good for us. And to work on our self-esteem. Money problems, probably almost as easy as anything, can make us feel like a failure. Find ways to remind yourself of your value. What are good things in your life? I always describe people that money problems are this little thing, almost like a camera or on your phone where you expand the vision and you see the whole picture. You zoom in and take a picture of that lighthouse on Lake Michigan. You push it back and you see the grandeur of the lake, right? Wow, look how big this is. The lighthouse becomes a little less more dramatic. We could do that with our lives too. What's in there? And certainly we want to practice mindfulness, which is this idea of being in the here and now. What are the things you can control and accept the things you can't? Sitting down and taking a deep breath and just saying to ourselves, what can I do with what's going on right now? I'm going to slow down. Take a deep breath through your nose and hold it for a beat or two and slowly exhale through your mouth. Go ahead and try that. Just let the body slow down. And don't worry about what happened yesterday and don't fret about what's going to happen tomorrow. Just here I am. Nice deep breath through the nose. Fill your lungs up, hold it for a second or two, and slowly let the air out through your mouth. Tells the body to just shift and slow down. We have to manage that stress. Well, finally, financial stress can come into our way in our lives in a roundabout way. With our friends and families, other people we care about. I mean, their troubles can create secondary stress for us. We may worry about how they're doing, and we may not know what to say. Or maybe you're in the firing line of their emotions. Your friend's changing, they're angry all the time, or they're grieving. How can you help them? Here's a couple thoughts. So that you don't take on that secondary stress, but also there. You can offer, be there, be present, right? Help them process. Just to be there, be part of them. Just taking time. Try to understand their situation. Ask questions, but let them talk about it. Remember I said earlier, we do so much better when we share a narrative. We want people to validate concerns. Allow them and validate their concerns and feelings. When we imagine their stress as if it's our own, we can suffer the same stress. Our goal is to have and express a compassionate understanding without assuming their feelings. We want them to feel heard. They want that. They want someone to hear them and not judge them. Third, let's not be afraid of emotions. Let them express them. If you're dealing with someone who's stressed and anxious, stay calm. Don't interrupt them. Let them be upset. Let them be upset. Maybe they need a good cry. Let them express what's going on. Let it flow off you. Let them vent. And again, as a supporter, know that you don't have to fix it. You may have helpful resources, but you're there not to solve it. Compassion, many times, is far more helpful than advice. Compassion is so much harder to get sometimes than just problem solving. And through all it, of course, remember self-care again. Take that walk, practice relaxation. But just being there for another person is such a gift. As we've said, if we bring this all the way around, financial challenges have a way of really becoming overwhelming, aren't doesn't it? It can be. Again, I would suspect if we really sat down and thought about it, we've always felt that. One of us felt that way in time in our lives. It can shut us down, and we don't feel like we can use our normal problem solving abilities. It begins to drain the joy of our lives. And in many cases, maybe we're not going to be able to recover our financial balance very quickly. But my friends, we all have the power to take small steps to reduce the impact of the stress. We have that power, that resiliency. The Japanese adage about resiliency, fall down 7 times, get up 8. We can change the picture. It starts with one step. Remember I said earlier, all this curiosity about what's going on, can we take one step? It can be all kinds of things. Maybe it's getting support, reaching out, making contact. It's about developing a plan, options, looking at options, setting goals, believing there's always alternatives, about making a move to say, I know I've been paralyzed. I'm going to do something intentional. Might be one simple step. And through all of it, be compassionate about ourselves. Be kind to ourselves. Give yourself a break. Anyone can experience financial problems. Yeah, money's important, but so is the quality of our lives. Certainly, a resource out there is our EAP program. This is a wonderful benefit that you have, and if you're not familiar with it, let me review it and see if you have any questions. But remember, it's a household benefit, so this is for you, for your partner or spouse, and anybody living with any children living with you. It's prepaid by your employer, so it's a free benefit, but it's a household benefit for you and your family. And it can be used in concert with each other. You could be seeing an EAP counselor for anxiety at work, and your 14-year-old could be seeing a counselor because they're struggling to identify why they want to go to school. Right? It could be used for any purpose, any area of stress, not just work related stuff, relationships, personal things, financial things, parenting issues, any type of stress you can call. One of the most powerful parts of the EAP is it's confidential. No one knows you've reached out to it. No one knows you made a call. No one knows you sent an email. No one knows that you've set up some resources. It's completely confidential. And EAP is there 24/7, 365. 24/7, 365. Because we recognize that sometimes you want to call outside of work hours. Sometimes things happen outside of work hours. I've raised 2 teenagers. Teenagers have a funny way of presenting situations well past normal office hours. Yeah, it can be somewhat of a hotline if you need it to be. It's not a hotline, though. You can call it anytime. This is where you go to get authorized face-to-face sessions or virtual counseling sessions with state licensed independent clinicians. You come to my clinic to see myself or any of our EAP folks, you're treated exactly the same way as any other client. The only difference is it's paid for. There's no copay, there's no deductible because it's an EAP benefit. But you use the EAP for face-to-face or virtual. You can also use EAP and get unlimited clinical telephonic support. You can call at any time and talk to a counselor on the phone. Sometimes you have an appointment 10 days from now, but what you're worried about just happened again. You want to do it right now. You want to talk to somebody. Maybe it's something chronic and you want to talk to somebody. I tried something 2 days ago, it didn't work. Now what do I do? Unlimited clinical support. You can also access EAP and get information on digital platforms with secure text issues and video sessions. Maybe you want some coaching on something. I'd like to learn relaxation techniques. They can set you up with a video session. You can call EAP, and this one in particular um, for this topic, where they have home life referrals. You can call EAP and get resource information on sensitive issues like elder care, child care. Your 82-year-old dad fell down again last night. He can't live independently anymore, and you don't know what to do. Who do you call? What services are out there? How much is this going to cost? They will help you find those information. They have people that will help you find resources, as well as you're eligible for a free 30-minute session with a financial consultant or an attorney. Free 30 minutes, right? And you know how much expensive those guys, especially lawyers. The only thing about the lawyers is they won't talk to you about employment issues, but any other area, and certainly the financial consultant. Sometimes you have a specific question, or you're just looking to get a plan together, or you'd like to start working on something. Well, you could use that 30 minutes, and then if you want additional time, you're going to get a discount if you like that professional. You can work with them. So the EAP is kind of this concierge and a partner in directing you towards resources. It's a place to go for assistance. And with our topic today, which sometimes has many different components, this is the place where you can call. And you're not going to get judged. You're not going to be told that you made mistakes. These are professionals that'll help you. And with our topic today, this idea about how emotional this can be and how powerful this can be, for you, this is EAP is a place to come. So what I hope we've done today, and then we'll open up the questions, is I've gotten you curious to look at a very, very relevant topic, a topic that's right there for all of us, to be curious to look at all its components and then begin to say there are some steps I can take to make this a healthier part of my world. All right, I'm going to pause there and go back to our host and see if there were any comments or questions before we wrap up our program for today.
Yeah, definitely, Dr. Trost. Thanks so much for all this information. Before I start rambling, let me just say that if you guys have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat, and then I'll go ahead and read them so that we can get them over to Dr. Trost. Um, on the topic of financial stress, when I first had my son, when I first became a dad, I mean, that opened a whole new realm of things that I didn't stress out about. I was, early 20s, just married, really not worrying about anything. And then having a kid, I was like, oh, great. Now we got to start thinking about not only the things that they need, but the things that they're going to need, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Schools and college and tuition and, just think about all that stuff. So I definitely had experienced all this. So this information was really good. Man, if I had this information a couple of years ago, I'll tell you. But it's like you said, like sometimes you don't really know what you need until you need it.
That's right. That's right.
And just being in that new situation is very daunting. It
Mm-hmm.
is very in some ways humbling because you figure again early 20s figuring like I got everything figured out, and then the whole world goes topsy turvy. Really, really put a lot into perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So I really appreciate this information today, Dr. Trost. I know that it resonates with me very powerfully because this is something that like I had struggled with when I first became a parent. Even when I first bought my house,
Sure.
that mortgage payment every month is still something that I dread.
Oh, yep. Yep. And when you have a family, it adds so much emotional parts to it too, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
you feel so hyper responsible. So I have to do this. And if you don't feel like you're doing it well, it brings up all those emotions. It brings up all the stress and the feelings of I'm not taking care of my family. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Somehow I'm failing. And that can be
Right.
so powerful for us.
No, absolutely. So this information is so good, and I hope that everybody who is in attendance today and everybody who's watching this after the fact can take some pieces from this and just remember that like you're not alone in this. Like Dr. Cho said, the AP counselors are here, and just finding that support, whether it's a friend, family, neighbor, whatever that looks like, make sure that you're leaning on what you have available to you.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Cho, it looks like we don't have any questions in the chat. So I just want to remind everybody that if you have any questions, please reach out to Wellness. Our email is wellness@transitchicago.com. Please, any questions you have regarding EAP or anything wellness related, definitely do not hesitate to reach out. And Dr. Chos, I just want to thank you once again for all this amazing information and for coming back to present with us. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, everybody. Let's take that moment. Let's take that moment and take care of ourselves. It's good seeing you, and
Absolutely.
I'll look forward to seeing you in the future as well. Thanks for the privilege of working with you today.
Of course. You take care.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.